What's going on, guys, and welcome back to the YouTube channel. So the session that you guys are going to be watching in the background is a session that you guys will have already seen before. If you've been watching my training programming series, this is my Push B training session. So if you guys are interested in hearing the programming and the setup for this session, then you guys can go ahead and check out my video on that. This video is not going to be about the training session that you guys are watching. I'm just kind of using it as background filler where I talk about the main topic, which is going to be some of the changes that I have made to my training programming within the past month or so. So if you guys have been following me for a little bit, there have been a couple clips that I have put up on TikTok and Instagram mainly, where I've been talking about some of the changes that I've been making to my training program as I kind of transition out of my diet phase and I start to kind of put myself in a position where I'm going to be reintroducing PEDs and then also reintroducing some food and then going to be pushing my body weight upwards going forward so that I can build more muscle mass. And so there are a couple different ways that I want to go about addressing this topic. So the first way that I want to go is kind of talking about what it was that I was doing previously. And then I'd like to kind of talk about some of the changes more specifically and then kind of get into why I am making those changes. So first things first, what was I doing previously? So previously I was training with a push-pull legs type of setup, but I had altered the setup slightly. So instead of training it a traditional push-pull legs rest, push-pull legs rest, or push-pull rest legs rest, or however you want to go and set it up, I was training with a 2-on, 1-off split, but I was prioritizing my legs. And so the way that my training split looked was legs, push, rest, legs, pull, rest, and then repeat. So I was still training with the push-pull legs program, but I was training my legs twice as frequently as I was training my push and pull sessions. And the reasoning for that is because I truly believe that my legs are the weakest body part that I have in terms of physique development and body parts that are preventing me from getting on stage and doing well on stage. And so I wanted to train my legs more frequently to be able to improve them. And so even though I kind of adjusted and played with the setup of my push-pull legs program, it's still a push-pull legs program. I'm just kind of executing it in a slightly different way. And the way that I was running that program with the 2 days on, 1 day off format meant that some weeks I was training 4 days per week and other weeks I was training 5 days per week. It all just kind of depend on how the cookie crumbles and basically how the calendar played out. So some weeks it was Sunday, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. And then some weeks it was Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So it just really kind of depended on how my work schedule went, whether I was going to be training 4 days or 5 days per week. But the problem was that I started to notice that I would say about every 3 out of 4 weeks of every month were weeks that I was training 5 days per week. And I just noticed that I was getting a little bit more beat up and fatigued than what I used to be doing when my training split looked more on a 4-day per week type of basis. So that was going to be the first change that I made, is that instead of working on a 2-on, 1-off split, I have given myself some dedicated training days. So right now, instead of a 2-on, 1-off split where it just kind of depends on whatever day it is and then I can go train on any day, I am now training Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then one weekend day, which for right now has been Sunday, but that really is up in the air and it can be moved depending on my training schedule. So why did I do this? So the first thing is that it gives me consistent days to train, and this kind of makes it easier for me to plan my training around my lifestyle, because while I am an online coach and I do get to do a lot of work from home, I am not a full-time online coach yet, and so I still have to work a part-time job to be able to pay my bills. So by having set days in which I train, it allows me to kind of set my schedule up in a way where I can get all of my client work done and not have it really interfere with my training or my content production or anything along those lines. Also, obviously, shifting down from training 5 days a week to 4 days per week is going to facilitate more recovery. Obviously, if I'm taking more rest days, I'll be more recovered and more refreshed. And we can kind of assume that if I'm going to be more recovered and more refreshed, I'm going to be able to go into the gym and put better effort in and put in higher quality sets, which is just going to help trigger more hypertrophy. So the biggest change that I made was reducing my total days of training per week from 5 to 4. Now, the second change that I made is actually a relatively big one, and that is reintroducing the RDL to one of my leg days. So if you guys have been following me for a while, I have not really been doing any sort of hip hinge for a considerable amount of time. Ever since I started doing this very high frequency leg program, I had removed my hip hinges. And the reasoning for that was because I was doing some sort of squatting pattern every 3 to 4 days. And when you're squatting that frequently, I personally cannot also add in a deadlift or a hip hinge on top of that. My lower back just really can't handle that. So the biggest change that I made was changing one of my leg days into a leg day that allows me to RDL. And I think that the RDL is a huge bread and butter movement that is not only going to develop thick hamstrings and glutes, but thick just overall posterior chain. I'm going to get traps and spinal erectors and everything from the RDL. So it was really a movement that I had been wanting to get back to for a long period of time. And I just was kind of waiting for the right opportunity to be able to reintroduce it into my training program. And I just kind of felt that with dropping my training from 5 days to 4, I was going to be more recovered and more rested, and that would be the perfect time to introduce a movement like the RDL, because not only is the RDL a great bang for your buck movement, like I mentioned, but it's also an extremely fatiguing movement. I personally find the RDLs to be just as fatiguing, if not more fatiguing, than something like a hack squat or a leg press. So if I'm going to be doing a training program that involves high fatiguing exercises, then I need to have that parameter set up so where I can be able to recover from that. And so I think reintroducing the RDL at the same time as changing my split from 5 days to 4 days was really just perfect timing. While I'm on the topic of talking about my leg days, I have also made another programming change to my leg days, and that is moving my bicep and delt accessory work from the beginning of the session to the end of the session. So if you guys have been watching my content for a while, you will have noticed that on every single leg day, the very first thing that I do will either be some bicep curls, some lateral raises, and occasionally I will do both. And I've kind of talked about this on my leg day videos before, so I don't want to get too in depth on it on this video, but the basic premise for it is just increasing the frequency in which I train those muscles. And I still want to keep that in my training program because I don't think that your delts or your arms can ever be too big. So I don't necessarily feel the need to pull back on doing that accessory work and that frequency work, but I do not want to prioritize it any longer by doing it at the beginning of the session. So I was originally doing it at the very beginning of the session just so that I could kind of get it done and get it over with and just not have to worry about it anymore, because to be 100% honest with you guys, I find doing that stuff very boring, especially when I go in the gym and the only thing I can think about is how I'm going to kick the shit out of this hack squat or this RDL. The last thing that I want to do is do some namby-pamby bicep curls. So I was originally doing that stuff at the beginning just to kind of get it done and over with, but I found that I would just much rather get into the leg portion of my leg workout than start off with that namby-pamby bicep work. So I've moved it from the beginning to the end, which still allows me to tack on the frequency, but it allows me to further prioritize my legs and put more energy into the legs than I would be if I was doing some fluffy curls or lateral raises before I got into the brunt of the work. So my main overall thought process and reasoning as to making all of these changes is just to further promote more recovery. So as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I am kind of in a phase right now within my bodybuilding journey where I'm kind of getting ready to push back upwards and bring some more food back in and bring the PEDs back in. And so my goal is always within training to focus on my performance. but even more so with this time coming up, because obviously if I'm going to be entering a phase of using drugs and using more food, the goal is to build muscle. And the best way that we're going to do that is by driving our performance as high as we can, as fast as we can. And so that is really kind of the main thought process as to making all of these changes is I want more recovery in my overall program. I want to be resting more. I want to be getting, as I keep saying, better recovery so that I can come into the gym and not only take progressions, but I can take more progressions than what I was doing faster. As I start to enter this phase of pushing food and pushing PEDs, obviously my main goal is to increase my lifts as much as I can in that short period of time. And so I think that taking some steps back in terms of my overall workload just to promote more recovery and more rest is only going to help me do that and help me accomplish my goals even quicker. I hope you guys enjoyed this video of me just kind of spilling some of the thoughts that are on my mind as far as my training programming. Training programming is really something that I could talk about for hours and hours on end. So if you guys have any questions, please feel free to leave them as a comment or reach out through DM, and I will get back to you guys as soon as I can. As always, guys, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch this video. And as always, guys, take care of yourselves.